Hello, good morning or good night or afternoon, everybody. I'm back. So as you may be able to see, I'm outside just working with the natural light, whatever's coming in. So I apologize if the lighting or any sounds are a little bit weird. We're roughing it a little bit here. I'm gonna be doing something a little bit different today, which is a big passion of mine, which is like TV shows, like lots of pop culture in general. I really love pop music, television. I love to analyze. I love to dig in deep. I'm gonna be dipping my foot in with a series that I am so in love with, so obsessed with. I've watched it and rewatched it so many times. It's a Netflix show, and now we've recently gotten an announcement for season 2. There's only one season out so far. We've gotten an announcement for season 2. So I am so excited. What I want to do is I want to do a little series where I talk about the first season, like, kind of go through the storylines, the episodes that we currently have, and then I also want to make what are my predictions for season 2. That TV show is Nobody Wants This, starring Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, and the announcement was semi-recently made that season 2 is coming this year, 2025, on October 23rd. So I am so excited, and I want to take this opportunity to talk about the first season and then get ready for season 2. All right, so I'm going to start with the first 2 episodes of the first season, which are Pilot and A Shiksa Walks into a Temple, both of which were written by Erin Foster and directed by Greg Mottola, and the entire series was released on September 26th, 2004. So just a little over a year until we get the sequel season. So we jump into the first episode after some nice B-roll, setting the scene. This series is set in LA. And we start with Joanne running away from a bad date that she was on and getting picked up by her sister, Morgan. And then they go into recording a podcast. We learn that they are podcasters. And they talk about like their dating lives and kind of sex and relationships, that kind of thing. We already are starting to give some characterization because during their podcast recording session, Morgan mentions to Joanne that Joanne has like a pattern with dating, going after emotionally unavailable men. And so Joanne says, all right, you know what? I think I'm going to try to start making better relationship choices. So that's kind of where we're starting off with these 2 characters. I'm so excited to dive more into Joanne and Morgan. I just find like all the main characters on the show so fascinating. So we're already starting with a little bit of characterization there. Next, we jump over to the other sibling duo of this show, which is Sasha and Noah. So I actually want to start by talking about Sasha. Noah is like the other main character, as you probably know, but Sasha is his older brother, and I want to talk about what is the very first interaction that we have with Sasha, which is like they're walking into the apartment and Noah's like, I need to tell you something. And Sasha's like, what is it? Is Esther cheating on me? Esther is his wife. He's like, Esther's cheating on me, isn't she? Well, whatever, I'll just stay with her. Like, that is the first introduction that we have both to Sasha, and although she's not actually in this scene, also to his wife, Esther. He says, like, she's cheating on me. Oh, I'll just stay with her anyways. So one thing I'm going to be looking at in these videos is I'm going to trace like some arcs of character relationships. Sorry if you can hear some noise there of a car passing by. One of the character dynamics that I'm going to be really digging into and paying lots and lots of attention to is kind of the little triangle of Sasha, Morgan, and Esther. They have a little thing going on, and I just find it so fascinating. So this is the first introduction that we have to the relationship between Sasha and Esther, how Sasha is as a person. First of all, his immediate assumption is that his wife is cheating on him. Like that's, he's like, it's inevitable that my wife is cheating on me. And then he's like, but I'll just stay with her though. Like that, like boom, boom, boom. That's his immediate succession of thoughts just from Noah saying, I have to tell you something, which is just that like something about his hair, actually. What like this is starting to reveal about the internal world of Sasha, about his dynamic with Esther, and kind of setting the stage for how he starts to connect a little bit later on with Morgan, I just think is super fascinating. Anyways, we go inside and we meet Rebecca, Noah's girlfriend. Here we start getting some characterization of Noah. So they have some takeout food and Noah's like, hey, let's just eat it out of the box. And Rebecca's like, no, I'd really like to put it on plates. Noah's kind of like, oh, okay. It's such a little thing, but hear me out, okay? I am really fascinated as well to track Noah's characterization throughout this show and how Noah reacts to being in different environments. We'll come to learn that they are all Jewish. Noah is a rabbi. I mean, this is not much of a spoiler. So Noah is part of a community. It's a religious community, and it's a community that's very dedicated to sort of like propriety, tradition, maintenance of tradition, and Noah holds a very prominent position in that community, and he holds a lot of like responsibility to be an example to that community. And I believe that's something that Noah really loves. He's passionate about, he's happy about doing. However, there's another side of Noah that we will see throughout the series where he wants to be able to be a little more casual. He's not always satisfied or fulfilled by adhering to these more rigid structures of behavior, presentation. And I think this plate thing could look like nothing, but I think this plate thing is actually the first little example of like a clash between Rebecca, who is sort of a representation of, she wants things to be a little bit more rigid, a little bit more, no, I don't want to eat out of a box. Like, I want to be more proper. I want to have more of like a formal presentation. Even though this food is just takeout and we're just going to sit down, I want to put it on a plate. And Noah's kind of like, oh, like it all, he feels like he's being chafed at a little bit by having to adhere to certain little structures that he is actually not that happy about. He'd rather eat out of the box. He'd rather get to feel more relaxed, more casual. Then we see that Rebecca has, behind his back, essentially gone into his personal things and unlocked his personal drawer and taken out and put on an engagement ring that Noah had bought for her and has apparently had for months. You know, I want to give a little bit of space for Rebecca. Like, if they've been in this long-term committed relationship, and there seems to have been this kind of mutual expectation, because he bought a ring. So like, he did buy her the ring. So there seems to have been this mutual expectation that they were on the road to getting married. And if this has kind of been dragging on for months and Rebecca's kind of like, I want to feel like I'm advancing in my life, I think that that's super valid. In fact, I have a friend who was sort of like dragged along a little bit in a relationship where she was like, okay, I have the expectation that this is heading towards marriage. It's been like a years-long relationship. I want to feel some progress. And her partner was really kind of stalling until in the end, he ended up breaking it off, and that was very hurtful. So I do have like space and empathy for Rebecca's position. I don't think that her searching, like finding the engagement ring and putting it on, I don't think that was the right move. And I understand Noah's side as to why that felt like invasive and kind of like forcing his hand. Like, I personally think the right move would have been, hey, we need to have a serious conversation about our relationship. I have had the feeling we're on the same page, but now I'm not sure and we need to like figure this out. I think that would have been the right move on Rebecca's part, but I understand why she felt like she had to make a move, because Noah was stringing her along, to be honest. And I don't think he did it intentionally. I think he just kind of didn't want to confront some emotional things and confront the feeling that he obviously had deep down that Rebecca was not the one for him, because it was hard and painful and complicated. And so he just sort of subconsciously pushed that down until his hand was forced. But he was not really taking responsibility and taking action on his commitment as a partner until she forced his hand. Anyways, we have the scene where they break up. Basically, he's just like, no, I don't think this is actually for me. And then we just cut. So we don't really get much time to like sit in that. Like, immediately we meet Noah. He's in this long-term relationship where he had bought a ring for his girlfriend, and he's like, actually, this is over. All right, so now we meet Joanne's parents. Joanne and Morgan and their parents are out for dinner, and we immediately sense the dynamic. We learn that the father has come out as gay and therefore separated from their mother. And I want to say, like, over the course of the series, we don't see much of the father. We do see some, and I'll definitely comment, but I feel like we don't get much of an examination of the father's experience, what it must have been like to be a closeted gay man in a relationship with a woman and living an inauthentic life for years, probably decades. We don't like go very much into that, which, you know, I know it's like a limited series and the dad is not the main character. I wish we would have gotten a little smidge of exploration of that, because personally, I have to say, I don't tend to be a fan of stories about queer love that center around the straight people. Like, oh, the straight people are actually the victims. Oh, there was a straight person who either was in a relationship or had feelings for a queer person and they end up, you know, feeling rejected and they're sort of positioned as like the victim of the story. So I don't tend to like that narrative. I want stories about queer love to exist just like independent of straight people and straight people nonsense, okay? I think queer love is worthy of existing on its own without having to get all concerned about how it affects the straight people. So that's sort of my commentary on that. And I will say in this series, we definitely get a lot more examination of the experience of the mother than the father. However, like if I take this as like real, like if this were in real life, what would happen? I see both the position of Joanne's mother and father as tragic. I mean, for Joanne's father, again, being a closeted gay person who you feel like, and they are, again, an older generation, and not that it's like great to be queer now, it's rough out there and I know that, but there has been lots of like developments that were not even in place at the time of older generations. And so Joanne's father, he's in the position of he's had to live his whole life being unfulfilled romantically, living a lie, having to present himself in this inauthentic way just in order to feel like safe or accepted. I mean, that's shit. That is like horrible and tragic that he's had to go through that. And it's nice that finally at some point in his life he gets to live authentically. I do also see the pain if this is like a real life scenario. I'm trying to separate it from like a writing narrative kind of thing, and I just imagine if this was real life, okay? And in Joanne's mom, I also see that it's a very sad position to be in. Like, my assumption is she genuinely loved him romantically. She believed, and it's not her fault that this was untrue, and she believed that that was mutual. She believed that she had what is considered a normal, like, loving long-term marriage where you both romantically love and desire one another. She's lived probably, again, decades of her life with this belief, only to have the rug ripped out from under her and be like, that was all fake. And again, I'm not blaming the father as if he was faking and he's at fault. No, because again, he was doing what he felt like he had to for like acceptance and safety in society. So it's not his fault. It's like homophobia's fault. But the mom, it's like she loses the person who in her heart was like the love of her life. She realizes that the love she thought that person had for her has never been real, not in the way that she wanted, not in the way that she believed. I mean, that's heartbreaking as well. And again, I don't really think it's either of their faults. The mom does make some snide remarks about the dad being gay at dinner. That's not great. We don't like it. But also I'm like, if you're still harboring hurt over your ex, you kind of make snide, like people make snide remarks and you'll kind of pick whatever target you can. And in this case, it feels like, you know, the sort of reason for him leaving her was his sexuality, and that's what she's gonna kind of zoom in on. I don't get the sense that his mom is homophobic, although the comments she makes, again, are not cool. We don't love it, but I think she's still nursing a broken heart. I think in order to like try to find a sense of healing, in order to try and fill like this hole in her heart from the heartbreak of like losing her lifelong partner and realizing that, like, you know, their relationship was built on inauthenticity. In order to heal and fill those things in her heart, she has turned to some very new agey kind of philosophies. She mentions having like a sound therapist. At some point later on, like it's mentioned, she's doing like ayahuasca. So she's turned to some very like sort of alternative, maybe more spiritual, new agey sort of philosophies and practices. The way the series frames this is not in like it doesn't take these sorts of practices very seriously. It's kind of like a joke. That being said, like these are, you know, practices that people and philosophies that people have in their real life, and this is something that, you know, and it's not like a joke or anything. These are certain ways that people like to structure their life, their spirituality, and this is what their mom is turned to, but it's kind of treated as like a bit of a joke and like for comedic effect and sort of dismissive. Whew, all right, we are getting some wind here. It's the elements, folks. At this dinner, Joanne actually gets a call about the podcast. She and Morgan go run out. It's like a representative from a network. And we find out that Joanne and Morgan are really hoping that their podcast will get acquired. So, they make their bag, like, go get it, ladies. The representative from the network who might possibly be acquiring their podcast is saying, oh, do we need to get Morgan? Not knowing that Morgan is also there and he's on speakerphone. He says, oh, do we need to go get Morgan, or does that not matter? And I will say, to Morgan's credit, because I'm going to be contrasting, as Morgan and Sasha are both the two siblings to our two main characters, Joanne and Noah, I'm going to be comparing and contrasting them a little bit. We already saw that Sasha has a little bit of a weird complex with his wife, and when Morgan hears, does it matter if Morgan is here or not? To her credit, I will say, she's like, excuse you, bitch? Like, yes, I do matter. So, good for her. And they get some news about their potential acquisition. Oh, good grief, this win. It's also, again, kind of setting up the dynamic between Morgan and Joanne and kind of positioning Joanne as the star. Joanne's the one who received the call. Joanne's the one who the representative is interested in talking to. So we're kind of getting this sense, like, between the two of them, Joanne and Morgan. Joanne's kind of like number one and Morgan's like number two. We get this sense a little bit in this scene. Another little thing that I want to point out that we find out at this dinner, which is really said in like a very throwaway line, like it's really not even, it's just like sort of a comedic little throwaway line. We find out that Morgan is divorced. That's something, like, we get no information about that, no more information at all, but Morgan like has this history, which is obviously rich to mine with character defining things that we get just no more information about. So I'm really hoping, I'll talk about this more in my predictions video, but hoping maybe we get a little bit more insight into Morgan's background in season 2. Okay, so now we get to the good stuff. Joanne is getting invited to a dinner party with her podcast agent. Gonna go like basically trolling. It kind of sounds like she's trolling for guys to like generate more stories for the podcast, like dating stories and whatnot. But she goes to this dinner party and finally we have Noah and Joanne meeting, their first encounter. I'm not gonna do a play-by-play. Their chemistry is obviously just like off the charts. Belle and Brody are champs. They immediately click and everything. It's super cute. They're bantering. They're, flirting. There's a fun little mix-up where Joanne thinks that another man at the party is a rabbi, and then she finds out it's Noah. They're really good at looking at each other. They're all intrigued, and it's a really sweet meet cute. It feels natural. Two people meet at a dinner party. It's not on an app, which these days I feel like is like gold. You met someone out in the real world, so that's really cute. Anyways, what I want to talk about from this whole sequence, the dinner party, him walking her out to her car afterwards, is like, what are to me, the key moments that are starting to define their relationship. So Noah first leans over to their mutual friend, the podcast agent, Ashley. He leans over to her right after he first learns about Joanne's podcast. Another person at the dinner makes a comment about Joanne's podcast, and she says like, oh, in one episode you talked about how if you're going to do a threesome, make sure you're the hotter person in the threesome or something. Joanne's like, yeah, that's right. and this moment when Noah gets this little bit of insight into Joanne and her job, he leans over to Ashley. He's like, hey, tell me about your friend there. And I think that is super interesting because like that is what catches his attention, and I think that is like the little turning point for him where he's catching an interest. Noah, again, we're going to talk about, he's a rabbi, so he's in a position where he kind of needs to operate within some like structures of like a certain type of propriety, a certain type of presentation, and not being involved in subject matters that are like more raunchy. And precisely at hearing about the nature of Joanne's work, which is pretty raunchy, he takes an interest. He already kind of has an interest, but he like ups his interest with her. Now, I think we're starting to see the kind of two sides of Noah. I think that Noah really is very devout to his religion, his position. He likes being the good rabbi. He likes being like that example of a certain type of behavior. But I think he has another side to him, a side that likes to let loose, a side that likes to be naughty, a side that likes to behave or engage with things that are not considered appropriate by his community and for his position and work. And I think that when he connects with Joanne, that other side of him is able to come out and be engaged. And I think that is where the seed of his really intense interest in her begins, because he's able to be another version of himself with Joanne that in his life, with his family, with his friends, in his professional life, his whole sphere, he gets to have another side of him come out with Joanne that like never gets to see the light of day. And I think immediately, I don't think it's necessarily conscious. He doesn't think, ooh, I want to be with a raunchy lady because, I like that. I don't think he thinks that consciously. I think it's just sort of an automatic reaction that he's like, being around this woman makes me feel good. It feels right. It feels fulfilling in a way that I don't feel otherwise. And I think this is where it starts right here, that Joanne brings out another side of Noah that he does not get to engage or get to like live in his day-to-day life. I think that's a major turning point for him. I think the major turning point for Joanne, and again, she's obviously already interested before this, like during the party, there's an obvious chemistry between the two of them that they're both feeling. In the show, the two characters are feeling this romantic tension, and they don't hide it either. This is one thing I love. Little side note, they're not playing games. Like, both of them are being very open about the fact of like feeling interest in one another right from the get-go. I love that. They're fucking grown-ups, even though both of them have ways that they can grow and mature. Like, being a grown-up doesn't mean, you got everything figured out, but they're like fucking adults, and they're not playing games like, ooh, should I let him know if he likes me? No, they're just like putting it out there. It's throughout the whole dinner, but the turning point for Joanne, I think, is when they're going out to the car. He makes that comment about, you are like a beautiful, complicated, vulnerable woman. She says, I'm not vulnerable, and he reads her for filth. And he's like, you're wearing that big ass faux fur coat because you want attention and you're afraid of not feeling special. Like, yeah, you are vulnerable. There's a break, because up until this point, we felt like Joanne is really in control. She always has a quip, always has a comeback, always has, a line. And in that moment, she just breaks. She's like, what the fuck? And we feel like she immediately sort of loses control of the situation, and she realizes this guy is on another level. First of all, this guy, after knowing me for like a couple hours, he can see me enough to like make this on point and very deep and accurate reading about me. Like, he can infer this thing about me. We get the feeling that Joanne is used to being perceived in a certain way. Has control of her image, and she is used to her image working the way she wants it to. She's used to being perceived the way she intends to be perceived. She had no intention of Noah being able to perceive these more deep qualities about her. She had no intention, and he just went and did it anyways. And she now has lost a little bit of control of the situation, but she has found somebody who sees beneath the surface, somebody who's like on another level, somebody who will take the time, who will take the effort to pay attention to her as a deeper human being, and somebody who can like contend with her like mental prowess. Somebody who can just like cut right through and be like, nope, can't play those. They're not like playing games, but like, you can't manipulate how I see you. I'm seeing you for what you really are. And I think that is a huge turning point for her. I think it definitely kind of takes her aback, but she also likes it. And she's like, this is a different kind of guy. And this feeling of having him see me in this way also feels good in a way that I've never felt with all these like fuckers that I'm dating just so I can have stories about my podcast. All right, so we close out the episode with Joanne being on yet another bad date. This guy who she's on the date with is being like a caricature of just some self-absorbed Hollywood asshole. She hears from Ashley that Noah was asking about her after the dinner party, so she spontaneously runs and listens to the sermon that he's giving at his temple that night. So it's a really cute little sermon. Noah sees her come in. They're kind of like connecting. After the sermon, they come together, they say hi, they're, feeling one another. We meet Esther. I cannot wait to talk more about Esther later on. And we meet Noah's mother, Bina. And as they see Noah and Joanne talking to one another, they come and sort of encroaches this wall. They're like, who is that woman? So we're automatically like setting up sort of like a conflict or the stakes. There's obviously very strong disapproval for Noah interacting in a pretty obviously kind of flirtatious, but I would say very harmless way. Like they just say hi and, they're just looking at each other, but they're obviously having chemistry. And Noah having this interaction with an outsider woman who is obviously not a member of the temple. I think they can probably infer right away that she's not Jewish. There's very obviously incredibly strong disapproval for this happening, and they refer to Joanne as a shiksa. I want to say that again, obviously in this series, the Jewish faith plays a huge part in this series. I want to do a little disclaimer that I'm not Jewish. I know very little about Jewish faith, Jewish culture. If I say anything that is incorrect about the philosophies, the culture, the teachings, the structure, like I apologize. That is purely out of ignorance. And if I say anything that is like offensive to the Jewish community, I'm really, really sorry. That is not an intention that I have at all, but I am ignorant. And what my intention is to react to what I see in the series, and not like be extrapolating, but I just want to react to like what I see in this series, sort of the text of this series. I want to react to that. But if I say anything along the way that is inappropriate or offensive about Jewish culture, I am sorry, and I'm super open to hearing about like ways that I'm fucking up and ways that I can be better, more informed, more educated, and more respectful. So please feel free to give me that kind of feedback, although you certainly don't have to. But I want to approach this with respect for the Jewish culture and Jewish faith, and I'm not sure if shiksa is like an appropriate term for me to use, so I think I'm going to try. I've already said it twice now, but I think I'm going to try to maybe not say it. I'll refer to her as like an outsider, but it is a term that's used pretty deliberately also throughout the series that we gather refers to a woman who is not a member of the Jewish faith. I think specifically it refers to when there's a woman getting involved with a Jewish man, but she's not a member of the Jewish faith. And I'd be really curious to know, is there a term for men, like a non-Jewish man getting with a Jewish woman? Just curious. That concludes the first episode, and I'm going to cycle right into the second episode. Immediately, we pick up right back in the temple, and Noah says, hey, like, I'm just going to wrap up some things here. If you want to wait for me, we can, like, hang out afterwards. Joanne goes out to wait for him, and Noah's essentially, like, attending to his rabbi-ly duties. Immediately, his mom is there, and she is not pleased with the appearance of Joanne. She definitely gives the impression of being very involved, some might say overbearing, but we also see Noah starting to act cagey. And again, I think this is what we're seeing, like the two sides of Noah. And I think he, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, knows that like there is a part of him that is not being fully fulfilled by his life as a rabbi in a very sort of like principled community. And he feels that like that is getting fulfilled by Joanne, but he's still devoted to his community. And there's a part of him that is really fulfilled by being a leader in that community. And therefore, we get this internal conflict. Right now, these two sides are kind of conflicting, with Joanne showing up and his mom being there and then being at the temple. And so how is Noah acting in this scenario? And he's acting kind of cagey. He's like, no, what? She's just a friend, like, whatever. And he's like, Mom, you don't know all my friends. And she's like, yes, I do. And that's when I'm like, yikes, your son's a grown man, but Anyways, we get this interaction here. We start to see Noah with this conflict, and Joanne, in the meantime, is waiting for him outside and ends up getting a call from Morgan, who tells her, like, you've been waiting for 15 minutes already? Like, that's ridiculous, and he obviously doesn't want you there. I think that that's kind of silly. Like, Noah's at work. This is his job. Like, he's at work right now. He's just finishing up his job. Joanne went to see him at his workplace. I don't think waiting 15 minutes when you go see someone at their workplace is unreasonable, frankly. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. But Morgan is kind of immediately like, oh my gosh, like, get out of there. I'm coming to pick you up. And now we start to set the stage a little bit for how Morgan is going to be feeling and responding as Joanne's relationship with Noah progresses, which, spoiler alert, is not great. And Morgan's not going to be super pleased about this either. You know, Noah comes out to get her, and oh my gosh. Okay, so I just have to, again, talk about Sasha and Esther for just a minute, because Noah finally extricates himself and is trying to go out to Joanne, and Sasha is on him all like, oh my God, are you like going to see that girl? And Noah's like, yeah, but shh, don't tell anybody. So they're obviously really cool, right? He's like, don't tell Esther. And then Sasha is just like, never. Oh my God, bros before hoes, am I right? Like, I wouldn't dream of telling her. And then Esther is like immediately there. She's like, tell me what? And he's like, oh my God, babe, I've been looking for you everywhere. Oh my God, like, I'm gonna go, like, take care of this whole, like, outsider lady. I can tell that y'all are super uncomfortable. That's, like, so inappropriate of him, and I'm gonna go take it. Like, you ladies, don't even worry, I've got it handled. And this is literally, he's, like, running out the door behind Noah, like, don't even worry, babe, I got this. And she's like, So now not only is Noah being cagey, Sasha is also being very cagey, and I think this is showing that Noah and Sasha are kind of on a similar wavelength about, like, both of them are really drawn and attracted to something that's, like, outside of their structure of, like, their life and family and community. And they're both super into, like, we want to experience something a little bit different, want to feel something a little bit different. But as soon as they're confronted with that in front of, like, their wife or mother, like, oh my God, no, totally, that's not even true. So they're just straight up lying. Like, they're wanting to go out and go hang out with these non-Jewish girls, but they're like, yeah, but no, like, that's not true to the ladies in their life. So both of them being straight up duplicitous and acting very cagey, and I'm not trying to, like, cast them necessarily in a negative light, because I feel like this is somewhat of a very natural and human response to being in a situation where you feel like you kind of can't do something that you really want to do, but you want to find a way to do it anyways. I personally don't think it's bad of them to, like, want to have an interaction or relationship with somebody outside of their faith, but it seems like that is seen as something bad or sort of inappropriate or distasteful to the people who they're closest with, and they're kind of trying to balance that. However, I do just have to call out, they are being duplicitous about what they're doing. So, and Sasha especially, like, Esther is his wife, and he is clearly, like, misleading her and not being straightforward with her about what's going on. We also get a little snapshot about the dynamic between Noah and Sasha, and it basically paints the exact same picture that we got between Joanne and Morgan. When Sasha's like, oh, take me with you. And Noah's like, like, fine, whatever. And we get the impression, again, that Noah is kind of the number one between the two siblings. He's the one that people like more. He's kind of the one that people see as number one, and Sasha is in second place. So we're starting to paint that parallel between the two sibling pairs and how they're going to interact when they sort of commingle together, which we're about to see. They all go out to get some drinks. I want to call attention to this little moment because there's the comedic haha when the car's, like, whatever smart system is reading Morgan's text out loud, and it essentially, like, compares Sasha to an ogre. And Noah's like, don't worry about it, it's not a problem. And Sasha's like, you should really be asking me if I'm offended, since there were rude comments made about me. And Noah's like, and Noah literally speaks on behalf of Sasha. And again, this is painted in the scene as, like, a very funny, comedic, lighthearted context. But when you actually look at what happens, Noah just speaks for Sasha, doesn't really give Sasha any place to have his own feelings or opinions. But Sasha just, like, submits to it and he just agrees to it. He's like, yeah, like, that's true. We're starting to paint this picture of Sasha definitely feeling in like a secondary position to Noah. He's very accepting of this. He was accepting of the idea of being cheated on by his wife, and now he's accepting of the idea that he doesn't really get to feel much about, being insulted. His brother is just going to kind of speak on his behalf. Another little point here is that when Joanne and Morgan are talking on the phone, when Morgan is coming to pick her up, she says, we got a call from the network, or I think from Ashley, and we might need to rebrand the podcast. They're thinking something more like overtly raunchy and sexual. And Joanne does not seem to be thrilled about this, actually, and we'll touch on this a little bit more later. Okay, it decided to go ahead and get really sunny, but now we are at the bar with our two sibling duos, or our quartuplet, and I have to say, Sasha is being flirty. I just need to call attention for a moment to the way Sasha is behaving at the bar, which again strikes me as a little odd, a little sketchy. I don't know why, I don't know how to describe it, but when Morgan, when he mentions that he has a wife, and Morgan's like, oh my God, you have no husband energy, like that, she nails it. And I have to say, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to remind myself of the actor who plays Sasha, but he is nailing that role and coming across in just a very weird, unexpected way. Like, first of all, he definitely seems kind of flirty around the two of them in general, but then when he is alone with Morgan, and it's definitely odd. He doesn't come across as a person who's just like sort of very stable and like content in his marriage. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too far into it. Obviously, married men can interact and be friends with like other women, but this seems like not quite just like a very platonic dynamic. So let me know if you agree, or if I'm reading a little bit too far into it. What I was saying about Noah with Joanne kind of feeling a certain side of him activated that he doesn't normally get, I'm kind of getting the sense of that with Sasha and Morgan as well. Like, he's really enjoying being around her, despite the fact that she's like doing nothing but insult him, essentially. But he's really enjoying being around her in a way that makes me feel like the attention that he's getting, or the feeling he's getting from their interaction, is activating or engaging something in him that naturally feels good to him that he's not getting in the rest of his day-to-day life. And I'm interested to keep tracking that throughout the series. Of course, the main event is Joanne and Noah talking, and I really love the conversation that they have because it feels very adult and it feels very just like grounded. So essentially, they talk a little bit about Joanne's podcast. She learns that he listened to her podcast, which I think is very sweet. He supports her professionally. We love that. And he actually enjoyed the podcast. She's kind of like, nervous that he has listened to it, but he's like, no, like he's taking it in stride, making jokes about it. He's meeting her on this wavelength of her job and her work in a way that I think she didn't expect. However, they talk about a subject that they have sort of distinct perspectives on, which is like how much of your personal life you share in public, because Joanne obviously does lots of this in her work, and Noah is kind of coming at it from the angle that he's like, he believes a little bit more in privacy. They talk about this in a way that to me is just very like respectful. I feel like there's this sort of misconception if you're like, flirting with somebody or bonding with somebody or dating someone and you want to connect with them, that you have to like, everything has to be in common. You have to agree on everything. When in fact, that's not necessarily the case. Joanne and Noah are coming at this topic about like sort of public sharing from a different perspective, but they both discuss it in a way that shows they're listening to each other. They're respecting the other person's perspective, even though it's a little bit different from their own. They're making the other like feel heard and understood. And to me, that's very like adult, that's very grounded, that's very healthy and lovely. So I love this basis that's being set for, kind of the starting of their relationship. Also, another thing is Joanne sees that Noah recognizes something in her work that is obviously very important to her. Noah points out that when Joanne shares, she is sort of empowering her listeners to be able to be more vulnerable, be more open, or be more accepting about themselves. And Joanne says like, yes, exactly. And we get more of the insight that that is a very important part of her work to her. She does it through the medium of sharing about like her dating life and, you know, some very personal information about her sex life and everything. But the goal, the deeper meaning of what she's trying to do is she's trying to help her listeners feel less embarrassed or less uncomfortable about topics that she's like, there's no reason to be uncomfortable about that for. We all experience these things, but we can break through these sort of stigmas if someone like me takes the lead and shows other people that it's okay. And she obviously feels very proud of that in her work, and that is something that causes her to be displeased or apprehensive about the idea of taking the podcast more in a direction of being just like raunchy sex stories that are only designed to like grab attention, which kind of seems to be the direction that their potential acquirers want it to go in. And Joanna's actually not happy about that because that's taking away from a deeper meaning and purpose that she feels she has professionally. And we love that Noah sees that and recognizes that and makes her feel recognized in that. Ugh, my lighting is getting weird, guys. Unfortunately, and you know, I love Esther, kind of, but unfortunately, Esther kind of disrupts and ends this very sweet interaction that's been going on between Noah and Joanne, really causes it to end on a sour note because Esther shows up and starts calling for Sasha. What Esther reveals at this time, because first of all she calls for Sasha and Sasha immediately does another switch where he's like, oh my god, like, coming honey, and so he flips back into like sort of being with his wife mode. Again, we're seeing both of them do these sort of flips between two sort of different sides. But then Esther yells out the window to Noah about how he was engaged to Rebecca, which is categorically false, and also that he's getting back together with her, which is again categorically false because Esther does not have the authority to make that decision, but she just says it as if she does, and I do not like any of this. I'm not happy with Esther for this interaction, and Joanne, understandably, upon hearing this though, she is just immediately put off. She's just like, oh my god, he's engaged, and you know, there's no time to sort of explain or clarify, and it's based on this false information. So that's a very unfortunate end to the evening. We now go into the next day where a full-on intervention is being staged by Noah's whole family, which has apparently been organized overnight because he hung out with a non-Jewish woman. So first of all, we see that this family is very clearly matriarchal. Bina, Noah and Sasha's mom, is very clearly at the top of the pyramid of the family and essentially has this inherent expectation that everybody else is going to go along with what she says. And it's very clear that she expects her children to, if she says something, they're like, yes, mom, of course, mom. So she's telling Noah that he is not interested in Joanne, and when he bites back a little bit or when he does not accept that statement from her, literally everyone's like, and Bina is like, excuse me? It's like you could hear a pin drop in that moment. And so you're like, wow, literally just like contradicting the mom is so intense that everybody is like in shock just in that moment. And also we see that Noah immediately feels guilt about it. So again, these are the two sides of him coming into conflict. In 1 second, he wants to push back against these restrictions being put on him. And in the next second, he feels bad about it because he does want to be like accepting of his mom. So here we're like upping the stakes on the conflict of, you know, Noah and what are the implications in his life if he wants to be with Joanne. Now we are getting deeper into some implications for Joanne because we're in a meeting between Joanne, Morgan, and some network representatives about the acquisition of their podcast. And it seems like basically everybody is on the same page except Joanne, where she's trying to make a point about what she feels is this deeper purpose of her podcast, which is about empowerment, which is about breaking down some stigmas and stereotypes, whereas the two network executives are just kind of like, what? We are interested in this podcast because it gets lots of attention, just because you guys are really like funny and raunchy, and you know, that's what people want to listen to. So they're identifying a certain element of this podcast and be like, this is what we want to focus on because this is what we find to be most marketable. Now, Morgan, it's really difficult to tell what is her actual feeling about the podcast, because it seems like her goal in this scene, in this moment, is she wants it to get acquired. So she's kind of going to basically mold herself to whatever she feels like is going to please the network executives. And you know what, again, I don't think that's wrong. That's not bad. Get your bag, make your professional advancement. They invested in creating this piece of media and now they want to cash out on it. Like, I think that's very standard and there's nothing wrong with that. However, obviously Joanne has this personal investment in this sense of purpose that she feels with the podcast. She's essentially having that stripped away from her. And it's obviously something she's personally invested in. And the disappointment on her face, and Kristen Bell's acting in this moment, I think is so beautiful, just showing that disappointment, because Joanne's conflicted. She wants to get acquired. Of course, she wants the podcast to get acquired and to make her money and everything. But that's coming into conflict with the fact that she doesn't want to lose the sense of personal fulfillment and purpose that the podcast gives her. So we go into back to a scene with Noah where he is performing what I assume are some standard duties of a rabbi working at a temple. He is doing like a kind of counseling or like a guidance session with a couple who are members of the temple. And we see in real time the direct application, or like the direct concept of Joanne's purpose in the podcast, which is Noah takes some advice or takes some inspiration from his last encounter with Joanne, and he uses what in sort of therapy psychological terms I think we would call like strategic self-divulsion, where he is in the role of like the counselor, the guide to this couple, yet he strategically divulges some personal information about his own life in order to help inspire or connect with the couple and help get them to where they need to go. And in real time, he sees veracity and the applicability of Joanne's concept of like being more open yourself can empower others to be open and others to like unblock things about themselves that they were keeping inside. And so after this session, Noah is clearly just like, I gotta make things right with Joanne. She knows what's up. She's got something real and special, and I gotta make things right with her. So after the whole debacle about, you know, Esther and giving false information about Noah's relationship status, Noah is able to like kind of sweet talk Joanne into coming back out to dinner with him. She starts off obviously very very sort of like standoffish, but thankfully he's able to clear up like the sort of actual factual information about his relationship status. And this is just such a pet peeve of mine. Like, I cannot stand when conflict in a story is created because somebody just told a lie. Like, one person tells something to another person, but that information is like false. Like, they just lied. But now, because of that information and it being believed to be true, it creates a conflict. And I'm like, this conflict is stupid and unnecessary because it's based on fake news. It's not even real. It's just false. So I was just like so relieved when Noah just like clarified. But I also appreciate he took responsibility. He's like, you know what, that representation of my relationship status was not true, so now Joanne has a more accurate picture. However, he's like, I still could have handled it better. I could have been more straightforward about my situation, and he takes some responsibility for that, you know. And he really just like kind of sweet talks her throughout the dinner. And I mean, I'm not gonna, like, who would not be sweet talked by Adam Brody? Like, come on, he's such a charmer. So they kind of continue their conversation, get back, you know, into each other's net. But I want to call attention to one thing that we see a little bit more characterization for Joanne, which is she seems to have this like fixation on Rebecca, and she owns up to it. Like, I want to give her credit. Again, she is an adult and she like owns up to things rather than kind of trying to hide them. Which is, she's like, oh my God, Rebecca, I'm like obsessed with your ex. And she's really fixated. She wants to hear more about Rebecca. I am wondering if this is a little throwback to what Morgan pointed out, which is that Joanne is very attracted sort of instinctually to emotionally unavailable men. While she made her commitment to make more healthy dating choices, you know, she's a very recent, like, you know, having a pattern of going after men who are emotionally unavailable. And that's obviously, she has this kind of like instinctual draw towards that. And Noah, I think up until this point with her, has been pretty open. He's been pretty available and he's felt very healthy. So that's felt like a positive step for her. But as soon as she's able to fixate on an ex who might be potentially like a threat or might be some sort of barrier to her being in a relationship with this man who she has feelings for, I feel like it's like a little hit. She's just like, ooh, give me some of that X, like dopamine or whatever, because that's sort of like her natural instinctual toxic dating pattern up until this point. So they finish up the night by being very like kind of flirtatious. And then finally we get to like the peak, the climax of this interaction of their relationship, which is that kiss. Am I right? The way they get into the kiss, I'm not gonna lie, it feels like a little bit contrived. I'm not sure though how they could have gone into it more naturally, kind of given the setup, to be perfectly honest. And I will say Brody and Bell do a phenomenal job of like lifting, of kind of making that feel very natural, kind of being like, yeah, but you know, we haven't kissed yet. And like, oh yeah, I'm aware. Like, but it clunks a little bit for me. It feels a little bit, I can't lie. But once we get to the actual kiss, it is quite a kiss. I think actually Kristen Bell's husband, Dax Shepard, this could be totally false, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I heard, or I read that he had like watched the scene and said, whoa, she doesn't even kiss me like that. You know, I mean, we get quite a kiss, ending on such a high note. It's really great. We've had like honesty, openness, sincerity, and then, you know, we get a nice steamy moment. And then it has to come crashing back down again, unfortunately, because Noah like gets some notifications on his phone and he tells Joanne right as she's about to leave, he's like, oh, this is work, and like, oh, being a rabbi, work never sleeps, kind of thing. And then after Joanne's left, we realize it was actually Rebecca, who we see like 2 hours prior had messaged him asking him to call her, and then in the last 10 minutes called him like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Yikes. I just hate to see, after these really lovely, like transparent, honest interactions that they've had, I hate to see us ending on another sour note of him being duplicitous. This time not with his family. Now he's being duplicitous in the other direction to Joanne. I just really hate that Noah ends this whole interaction by lying to Joanne. And honestly, again, I don't want to paint him in too harsh of a light though, because if you're just starting to date somebody and then you get like bombed with calls from your ex, would you tell them? Like, I feel like that's kind of I don't know if it's harmless, because it's like, it's a lie. It's not nice. And you're just like starting your basis with this person, setting a precedent of being mistruthful. So it's not necessarily harmless, but also I feel like it's very human, very understandable. Like heck, I might even do that. Like if I was starting to date someone new and then my ex is like blowing up my phone and I'm like, what the fuck happened? And I might not want to tell them about that right away either, you know? So I don't want to like come down too harsh on Noah. It's just like, we've seen him be duplicitous in the direction towards his family of kind of hiding his interactions with Joanne. Now he's being duplicitous in the other direction towards Joanne about something going on in his like personal life with Rebecca's not his family, but she's like in his family circle. That's a bummer. I don't like it, but yeah, we're left on that cliffhanger of kind of like, what's going on with Rebecca? Why is she blowing up his phone? Sorry, everybody. Camera died, and now I charged it a bit, but the sun has descended and now is shining directly on me. It looks a little wacky, I know, but I'm just gonna close out. So that was like my deep dive into the first 2 episodes. Please let me know what you think. Any comments, please keep it respectful. If you don't know how to be respectful, I don't care what you have to say, and get a fucking life. Sorry. So Keep it cute in the comments, as another one of my favorite YouTubers likes to say. But yeah, tell me what you think about this. Are you excited for the second season? And I can't wait to come back with episodes 3 and 4. Bye.